This 2-hour block of Revisewise programmes is about English, except for the first programme, which provides an introduction to all the Key Stage 2 national tests. That's followed by an introduction to the English test papers. Then it covers finding facts from fiction texts, getting the meaning from fiction texts, descriptive language, giving your opinion, your personal response, finding facts from factual texts, and getting the meaning from factual texts. The starting time of each programme is shown in the menu, so they can be found using the clock in the top right-hand corner of the screen. First, here's the introduction to all the Key Stage 2 national tests.
Hello and welcome to Revisewise. I'm Lindsay Fallow.
I'm Simeon Corty.
And I'm Simon Davis.
And we're here to help you make the most of what you know when you come to do your Key Stage 2 tests in May.
In these programmes, as well as in our books, radio tapes and on the internet, we're looking at all the English, maths and science that you might need help with.
We'll look at questions from previous tests and give you lots of hints to help you improve your marks.
There are 3 subjects in the tests, and I'll be helping you with your English.
I'll be helping you with your maths.
And I'll be helping you with your science.
The Key Stage 2 national tests are exactly that. They're national. Year 6 pupils all over England sit down to exactly the same test on the same day. That's over 500,000 of you.
The questions you'll get aren't set by your teacher. They're written by government experts who want to find out what you know. So nobody in your school knows what the questions are going to be until the day of the test.
And when is that? Well, the tests all happen during 1 week in May, and you have 2 or 3 test papers a day spread through the week. Your school gets a timetable like this, well ahead of the time, so everyone knows which tests you're doing and when. So what actually happens on the day of the test? Preparations start well before the pupils arrive. The teacher has to cover any displays on the classroom wall that could help with the answers. Next, the tables and chairs are moved so pupils can't see each other's work. It's time for their first test, and this Year 6 class is let into its classroom.
Right, sit down quietly.
The head teacher brings in the test papers in their sealed bags.
Don't open it, but on the front you can write your first name, last name, and then the school, which I've written on the blackboard for you. So take 1 each and then pass them on. You are not allowed to talk to other people in the room when you're doing this test. All the work in the booklet must be your own work, so you're not allowed to copy someone else's work. For this paper, you will have 45 minutes. Right, you may open to question 1 and begin.
Once the test starts, it's all down to them.
And when you do your test, it'll be up to you. What do some Year 6 pupils who've already done their tests think of them?
The first test I was very nervous, but as it went along I thought it was quite easy.
I felt a bit nervous that I wouldn't do very well, but when I got started, then I was all right and I paced myself.
I felt very nervous, but when I got into it, then I was better.
The first test I had, I felt really nervous, but then once I got started, it was okay.
At first, I thought it was going to be hard, but
but when I got into it, it was easy. Some of them are easy and some of them are hard. Well, either way, you might get them all right.
I got stuck on some questions, but then I figured them out, so it was quite easy in the end.
During the test, you can ask your teacher for help.
And I can read it again to you. I can't explain the question or any of the words, but I'll read it out to you. This cuboid is made from centimetre cubes. It is 4 centimetres by 3 centimetres by 2 centimetres.
They can only help by reading the question out to you. You have to come up with the answer by yourself.
And have a go at that.
And most of the written test papers last about 45 minutes. That's 3/4 of an hour.
Right, can everyone now stop writing, put your pencils down.
At the end of each test, the finished papers are taken away and kept in a safe place, like the head teacher's office, ready to be posted off to be marked.
So, there they are.
Your papers aren't marked by your teachers, but they're sent off to other teachers somewhere else in the country who don't know you or your school. That's important to know because they can only tell what you know from what you write down on your test paper.
What will you find in the test papers themselves? Well, to start with, no one is trying to trick you. The questions you'll get will all be about things you've done at school.
And you only have to get just over half the questions right, and you'll get a level 4, which is what everyone's hoping you'll get at the end of primary school.
So, first, the English test. Altogether, there are 4 English papers spread through the week of the test. There's a reading test, a writing test, a short spelling test, and a handwriting test. The one which gives you the most marks is the reading test. You can get up to 50 marks for it. In the reading test, you're given a booklet to read, and then you answer questions about it in an answer booklet. Then there's a writing test, which is worth 35 marks. In the writing test, there are 4 subjects to choose from, and you have to write about one of them. Next, there's a short spelling test, where you can get up to 10 marks.
Today, most people travel
In the
by
spelling
car.
test, your teacher reads a paragraph of text out loud, and you have to fill in the missing words in your booklet, spelled correctly. Finally, there's a short handwriting test for 5 marks. For this, you copy out a paragraph of text in your best handwriting. Altogether, the most you can get is 100 marks, though you only need to get just over half that to get your level 4. Your marks from the 4 papers are all added up, so even if you do badly in one paper, you could do well on the others and still get a level 4. In later programmes, we'll go through the things you need to know to do well in all these English tests.
Altogether, there are 3 maths papers. There's a short mental maths test and 2 written papers called Paper A and Paper B. In Paper B, you can use a calculator. In Paper A, you can't. And the 2 written papers are worth about 40 marks each. There are about 20 questions in each paper, and they cover all the maths that you've been taught at school. The 3rd test is a short mental maths test worth 20 marks. Now, in the mental maths test, the questions are played from a tape. You work out the answers in your head and write them down on the answer sheet. Adding up the 3 maths papers, the most you can get is 100 marks, though just over half of that will get you your level 4. In later programmes, we look at lots of past questions and go over the maths you need to know to do well.
For science, you have just 2 tests, Paper A and Paper B. They're worth about 40 marks each, so your top mark is around 80, with just over half the marks giving you a level 4. In both the papers, you're asked questions about all the different parts of science you've done at school. And to help you, we'll go through the sort of questions you might get and the science you need to know in later programmes.
So, what can you do to prepare for your tests?
Well, the first thing is don't panic. There's plenty of time and there's nothing in the test that you haven't already done at school.
And that's where your teachers come in. As the test week approaches, they'll go over all the things that you need to know and help you catch up with anything that you're not sure of.
What would the answer be?
This is a maths revision class a few days before the test day.
Smaller. So is my answer going to be bigger than 36 or smaller? Bigger. Bigger. Because 0.9 smaller than
Some is it 60
0.9 smaller than the others.
Your school will probably give you some past questions to do.
This English class are having a practice run at doing a complete test, using papers from a previous year.
In the weeks before the test, try to get a few early nights and plenty of sleep. Healthy food will help you concentrate, and however nervous you are on the morning of the test, try and have some breakfast.
There are things you can do at home as well. For English, you can think about the books you're reading, about the characters and if you liked them and why. You'll also find lots of factual writing around the house, like leaflets, labels, instructions, adverts and recipes.
You can try out your maths too. Going shopping offers plenty of chances to try out your mental maths.
Mine's 49p.
Mine's 55p.
And that makes
£1.04p.
Do you think you can work out from this, Emma?
Working through a mail order catalogue is a good test of interpreting data.
Age and years, and my age is 11, so I get the 11 grid, and from this I could work out that my height would be 146 centimetres.
There are lots of examples of measures that you can look out for, like weight, capacity and area.
And what can you do for science around the house? Well, you can look at the properties of materials and work out why they're used for different things. You can see how materials change their state by melting, freezing or evaporating. And you can look at plant life in the garden and study how your pets live.
And what advice do Year 6 pupils who've already done their test have to give?
Think about the question and just don't worry about it, just put your answer down.
Revise a lot and always listen to the teachers, because if you don't, you might miss something important that's on a test.
Revise as much as you can for science and maths. Read lots of books and go through the spelling rules with your teachers and parents and get as much help as you can.
Have confidence in yourself, because if you don't have confidence in yourself, you'll never get anywhere.
Of course, for all three subjects, English, maths and science, you can get lots of help from us in these Revisewise TV programmes.
In English, we'll help you get through all the different test papers. With the help of our team of puzzling pupils, we explain how to tackle the reading paper and the different kinds of questions you'll be asked. For the writing paper, we use clips from other BBC programmes to help you write a good story with interesting characters. There'll be hints to help your non-narrative writing, such as a leaflet, a letter, or a set of instructions. And we'll brush up your grammar, spelling and punctuation.
You only have to open your mouth.
And we're there.
In fact, we're there before you open your mouth.
There's also advice from our English team.
Once you've finished writing your letter, don't forget to sign it.
In the maths programmes, we'll go through all the maths you need to know. We use simple graphics to explain the basics of fractions, as well as how to use a calculator properly. We also look at how to solve maths problems. We remind ourselves about tables and graphs, and make sure we understand about measures and measuring. We explain the properties of different shapes and what happens when they move about. Finally, we'll go over ways of helping your mental maths. There's also advice from our expert maths team.
To find the answer to 59 at 43, I'd turn the 59 to a 60, then at the end take away 1 and the answer would be 102.
In the science programmes, we'll go over all the key bits of science you need to know. We look at living things in their environment, how the human body works, and how plants grow and reproduce. We look carefully at the properties of different materials, and we see how materials can be changed and separated. We deal with electric circuits, and we study forces and see how they can be measured. Finally, it's light, sound, and the earth and beyond, with our expert science team helping to make sense of it all.
We found out that seeds didn't need light, they can germinate in the dark. Seeds need water but not too much to germinate. The seeds without water never germinated and the seeds with too much water never germinated either.
That's the end of our first Revisewise programme. And don't forget, you can always wind the tape back to go over things again.
And there are also books, radio tapes and our interactive Revisewise website to help you as well.
How you get on in your test depends on you, but one thing's for sure, if you prepare well, you'll do well.
The next programme introduces you to the English tests.
Hello, I'm here to help our puzzling pupil and you make the most of what you know when you do your Key Stage 2 English tests. In each of these programmes, as well as in our books, audio tapes and on the internet, we're looking at the bits of English that you might find a bit tricky. So, first of all, what's the problem?
It's my English test and I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to do.
Right, let's have a look. Ah, the reading test. The reading test is just one of 4 English tests that all you Year 6s will be doing in May. Now, these tests aren't to trick you, they're just there to find out what you know. The first and most important test you'll do is the reading test. Here, you're given a reading booklet and an answer booklet. You can get up to 50 marks for the reading test. The other big test you get is a writing test with planning sheets to make lots of notes and a writing booklet. You get up to 35 marks for the writing test. Next, you get a couple of short tests. There's a spelling test where you fill in missing words, spelled correctly. You get up to 10 marks for the spelling test. And there's a handwriting test where you use your best handwriting to copy a short printed paragraph. You get up to 5 marks for the handwriting test. The marks from all 4 tests are then added up. If you get just over half marks, that should give you a level 4, which is what everyone is hoping you'll get at the end of primary school. Of course, how you get on in your tests is up to you, but one thing is certain, if you've prepared well, then you'll do well. And that's what we're here to help you with. So, what happens on the day of the test?
Year 6 pupils from all over England sit down to the same tests on the same days. The test days start early for your teachers. On the morning of the test, they take down any pictures or posters that might help you with your tests. Then they have to rearrange the room, separating out the desks so you can't see each other's work. Then you arrive. Once you're settled in your seats, the test can begin. This is the reading test, the first test you'll be given.
The reading test is really important because you can get the most marks on it. Here is an actual reading booklet, thanks. Inside you'll find a range of texts such as a story or poem, an interview or some letters, or perhaps a biography or a report. Of course, the reading booklet is different each year, but whatever's in there, you'll have done something like it in class. We'll be looking at all these different kinds of texts in later programmes.
So I've got my reading booklet, but I can't find any questions to answer.
Ah, you wouldn't. But don't worry, this isn't a trick. You have 15 minutes to read your reading booklet before you're given another booklet, and that has all the questions and spaces for the answers. This is what happens.
In front of you, you have a reading booklet.
This is the reading test. For this, you're first given a reading booklet. Then your teacher will read out the first set of instructions.
For the first part of the test, you have 15 minutes to read through the reading booklet thoroughly.
If you finish the reading booklet, remember, go back and read it through again. Don't waste any time.
Of course, if you do have time, there's no harm reading through the booklet again. You might have missed something.
But what if I find a word I don't know? I don't have a dictionary.
No, you can't have a dictionary in the reading test. But our English team have come up with some suggestions.
If I didn't have a dictionary, I'd look at the words around the word and see what made sense in between the words.
Read the sentence and if you think about it, what word could go in the space that you missed out?
Yeah, try and fix it all together.
And emphasise it, like speak out and try to really like work out what the word is.
So, here's the question and answer booklet to go with your reading booklet.
Thanks.
When you open your answer booklet, what sort of questions will you find? First, multiple choice questions like these. You have a choice of 4 answers, but only one is right. Once you've found the right answer in the reading booklet, you put a ring round it. Don't worry if you change your mind. Just cross through the first answer and ring the new one. Some questions want short answers, like a word or a phrase. Here's one, and the hint is you only have one line to write on. Some questions want more words or a sentence or two. They give you several lines to write on. Some questions want longer answers, like this, where you can give a more detailed answer. Try to write several sentences and fill as much of the space as you can. Whatever space you're given for your answer, try to write something, even if you have to guess. Empty spaces don't give you any marks.
How do I know what marks I get for each question?
You see those numbers there? They tell you how many marks you can get for each question. So this single word answer is worth 1 mark, this 2-line answer is worth 2 marks, and this longer answer, 3 marks.
Once 15 minutes are up, you're given the answer booklet and further instructions. Don't forget to listen very carefully. You'll be given some very helpful advice.
If you can't answer a question, just go on to the next one and come back to it afterwards if you've got time.
During the test, you can ask your teachers for help, but unfortunately, they can't actually help you find the answers to your questions. You have to work those out for yourselves.
15 minutes have passed. You've got another 30 minutes.
Throughout the test, your teacher will call out how long you have left to do it. Listen out for this, as it can help you pace yourself.
2 more minutes. If you've finished, please check what you've done.
Anything else you want to know? Some more advice from our English team.
First of all, preparing for your test.
Read every day for 20 minutes so you get an idea of how it's going to be. Read a hard text, read non-narrative text, and read stories that you can get hold of. Ask a parent or a teacher to help you if you get stuck on a word.
And during your test.
I was given some advice that if you didn't know a question or couldn't do it, leave it out and then come back to it later if you have time.
You have to pace yourself and time yourself in your head and follow the answers with your fingers so you know where you're up to.
Yeah, and read the question properly twice, and if you finish before the time, read it again to make sure you don't have any mistakes.
There'll be more about how to tackle your reading test in later programmes. Now, on to the other main English test, the writing test. Have a look at this. It's what you get at the start of the writing test.
Oh, yes. So I have to write a story in a piece of factual writing?
Well, not quite. You actually have a choice. Have a look at this. First of all, there are the instructions. See where it says you must choose one piece of writing from 4 in this booklet. That's a choice of 2 non-narrative options and 2 narrative short stories. The non-narrative options could be writing a letter, a leaflet, instructions, an interview, a news report, or even a newsletter. Your paper could have any of these. But whatever the options, you only have to do one piece of writing.
So I could just write a story?
Yes, or you could choose one of the non-narrative options. You don't have to make up your mind from the titles on the front page. There's lots of information inside the booklet.
Look at all the help you're given here to write a letter. This is the planning sheet, where you can make notes.
Even the story questions provide you with clues on what to think about and what the setting for your story could be. It's really important to look through all the booklet before you decide which piece of writing to do. How did our English team decide which piece to choose?
I didn't know what to choose between non-narrative and narrative, but because I was quite weak in non-narrative, I chose to do narrative, so I'll get a better result.
I done the non-narrative because I thought it was quite interesting about the facts, and it was really fun and exciting.
I chose the narrative because that's my strength, and I've had more practice on that.
I also wrote a narrative story because I have the ability to write a narrative much better than non-narrative. I had my facts straight in my head, so I knew what I was going to do.
I chose to do the question about the sea world because I thought it would be nice to do something factual and something that would be nice and not too complicated.
I chose to do spider supporters because it's really easy to do an argumentative writing, and it's much more easy because you can just throw a load of different words in that are really argumentative, make whoever's reading it feel like really small if they don't like spiders or something.
For the first 15 minutes, just think about what to write and make notes. Make the most of it. Write down any information you need to include or ideas for characters and settings. We'll be looking in a lot more detail at planning your writing in later programmes.
Once the 15 minutes are up, then what happens?
Then you'll be given the writing booklet. This has 3 pages of lined paper to write your story on. You'll then have 45 minutes to write your story. Don't forget to leave time to write your ending and check your punctuation. Good punctuation makes your writing make sense and gives you marks. There's more about punctuation in a later programme.
What about spelling? Will I lose marks if I misspell something?
No, you don't lose marks for wrong spelling in the writing test because your spelling will be tested in a separate spelling test. In fact, you can even use a dictionary in the writing test if you want to, in case you think of a really good word but want to check what it means. Now, some more advice from the English team.
Think of ideas that might be good, and think of some nice characters and describe them well.
And think of how your plan's going to be. Think about what kind of story is going to come up in the test, and really study hard.
You can do spider diagrams for the characters.
Yeah.
And do a rough description of the setting.
And try and make a conclusion or a twist to the story, or a resolution to end the story really well.
We'll get back to the writing test in more detail in later programmes.
You mentioned the spelling and handwriting test. What are they like?
Well, for a start, they're very short. This is a spelling test. You can get up to 10 marks for this. Now, you see these blank spaces?
So do I just fill in the blanks?
Well, not straight away. This is what happens.
Inside the booklet, there is a text with some missing words.
First of all, you listen as your teacher reads through the passage you've been given, including the missing words.
Usually of the backs of houses or factories.
Then it's your turn. Your teacher slowly reads the passage again, giving you time to fill in the missing words.
Leaves the town. It passes through some very beautiful countryside.
There's a whole programme on spelling later in the series. So, what's left?
Handwriting.
The handwriting test. You need to concentrate hard for this one. On the back of your spelling test, there's a short passage with several blank lines underneath. You have to write out the passage onto those blank lines in your best handwriting, joining up the letters if you can.
The handwriting test only takes 5 minutes and you can get 5 marks for it.
That looks okay. There's nothing to prepare for.
Well, you could practice. It doesn't take long and it would make a big difference. Just 5 minutes a few times a week. Let's check what we've done. We saw that there are 4 separate English tests. We looked at the different types of questions you'll be asked in the reading test. We saw that you only need to write 1 piece in the writing test, and we saw what happens in the spelling test and the handwriting test. Now you and your teacher can go over this at school. And don't forget, you can wind the tape back and look at bits of the programme again. There are also books, an English audio tape and our interactive Revisewise website to help you prepare for your test. So we'll let you get on with your test and you get on with your revision.
The next programme is about finding facts from fiction texts.
Hello, I'm here to help our puzzling pupil and you make the most of what you know when you do your Key Stage 2 English tests. In each of these programmes, and in our books, audio tapes and on the internet, we're looking at the bits of English that you might find a bit tricky. Today, it's finding fact from fiction. So what's the problem?
I'm a bit stuck on this question in the reading test.
All right, let's have a look. Aha! Multiple choice. Let me remind you what you have to do. For multiple choice questions, you get 4 possible answers. You have to read the story carefully and pick the right one. OK, so read us the question.
Clara was in bed when her mother, Lottie, came to wake her up, talk to her, give her a present or tell her off.
OK, so to answer this, we need to go back to the reading booklet. Here we are. Clara, Clara, are you asleep? May I come in? I'm not asleep, Clara said. Aha! Clara's not asleep, so Lottie can't wake her up. It's difficult. I keep thinking about tomorrow. Lottie sat down at the foot of her daughter's bed. Clara could see how tired she looked, even though the only light in the room came from the corridor. It's about tomorrow that I want to talk to you, Clara.
Lottie sighed.
So what's the answer?
Well, it's not wake her up, and there was no mention of a present or Clara being told off. But Lottie does say I want to talk to you, so that must be it.
Exactly. So put a ring round that answer. These questions are about finding facts. They're not asking you what you think, so the answers will always be in the story. Here's an extract from a story by Roald Dahl called Boy. Listen to the words carefully, and we'll have some multiple choice questions about it afterwards.
It was my first term, and I was walking home alone across the village green after school, when suddenly one of the senior 12-year-old boys came riding full speed down the road on his bicycle, about 20 yards away from me. The road was on a hill, and the boy was going down the slope. And as he flashed by, he started backpedaling very quickly so that the freewheeling mechanism of his bike made a loud whirring sound. At the same time, he took his hands off the handlebars and folded them casually across his chest. I stopped dead and stared after him. How wonderful he was. How swift and brave and graceful in his long trousers with bicycle clips around them and his scarlet school cap at a jaunty angle on his head. One day, I told myself, one glorious day, I will have a bike like that, and I will wear long trousers with bicycle clips, and my school cap will sit jaunty on my head, and I will go whizzing down the hill, pedaling backwards with no hands on the handlebars. I promise you that if somebody had caught me by the shoulder at that moment and said to me, "What is your greatest wish in life, little boy? What is your absolute ambition? To be a doctor, a fine musician, a painter, a writer, or the Lord Chancellor?" I would have answered without hesitation that my only ambition, my hope, my longing was to have a bike like that and to go whizzing down the hill with no hands on the handlebars. It would be fabulous. It made me tremble just to think about it.
OK, so here's a multiple choice question about this story. The author was walking home alone across the road, down the hill, across the village green, or down the slope. See how our English team deal with this question.
Let's look at question 1. The author was walking home alone. Was he walking across the road, down the hill, across the village green, or down the slope?
It was my first term, and I was walking home alone across the village green after school when suddenly one of the senior 12-year-old boys came riding full speed down the road on his bicycle, about 20 yards away from me.
Down the slope.
Down the slope. It does mention down the slope in the story, doesn't it? That isn't the right answer.
That's right. Even if you think you can remember the answer, always go back and check. Here's the extract again.
It was my first term, and I was walking home alone across the village green after school.
Across the village green.
OK, so what do you do?
We circle the right answer.
Good. Would you all circle the right answer?
Here's the next question. As the 12-year-old boy was on the slope, he rode backwards up the hill, stopped dead, made a loud whirring sound, or started backpedaling. You know the answer is in the story, so let's read on.
The road was on a hill, and the boy was going down the slope. And as he flashed by, he started backpedaling very quickly so that the freewheeling mechanism of his bike made a loud whirring sound.
David, what do you think he did?
Made a loud whirring sound.
And as he flashed by, he started backpedaling very quickly so that the freewheeling mechanism of his bike made a loud whirring sound.
It does mention made a loud whirring sound in the story, but what made the loud whirring sound?
The bicycle.
The bicycle.
That's an easy mistake to make. Sometimes the wrong answer is in the story as well, so you need to check exactly what the question is asking. So, what was the boy doing?
He started backpedaling.
So, multiple choice questions follow the order of the story.
And?
The answers are in the story.
But what do you have to watch out for?
There will be some wrong choices in the story too, so I have to check the questions and the story and not rely on my memory.
That's it! Great! Let's look at some short answer questions. They're still asking for facts from the story.
I need to find words or phrase for these, don't I? But if I have to read the whole story again, it'll take ages.
Don't worry, no it won't. Look at the question.
On pages 8 and 9, find and copy 3 of the words or phrases which show that the train and platform were crowded.
So, can you see the clue about where the answer might be?
On pages 8 and 9.
Exactly. And now you know what you're looking for, it'll really speed things up. You can just skim read. Skim reading is really useful, but what is it?
Skim reading is when we read fast until we find the point where we want to read in careful detail.
Now let's put skim reading to the test with this question on boy. Find 3 adjectives on page 1 which the writer uses to describe the boy.
Which part of the page will you need to look at carefully to find the answer to that? I'm going to ask Adam.
Near where he describes the boy on the bike.
You need to find the part where he describes the boy on the bike. So you're going to skim through the page until you come to that part.
Now, here's the text from boy. Why don't you skim read this until you've found the description of the boy? We'll leave the question up on the screen to help you remember what you're looking for.
Did you find it?
Here's the question again. Find 3 adjectives on page 1 which the writer uses to describe the boy.
It's wonderful one. Brave. Swift.
Notice that the answers are not complete sentences, and that's perfectly okay for a short answer.
That's right. No need to write out sentences when a few words will get you your marks.
Could anyone find any more?
Graceful.
So, did you find the adjectives? Here they are. Wonderful, swift, brave, and graceful. Any 3 of these would get you your marks. Here's the next question. This has 2 clues to help you know where to look. Can you spot them? Find 3 things on page 1 the writer told himself he would do one day, one glorious day. Let's see what the team makes of it.
What are those little marks around one glorious day? Adam, can you tell me?
They're quotation marks.
They're quotation marks. And what does that mean, Adam?
Those words have come from the story.
Those words are actually in the story. So how does that help you to find the answer to number 8, Adam?
It helps us because then we can try and look for one glorious day and then follow on from then.
That's right. Quotation marks are a great clue. You know that the actual words inside the quotation marks will be in the story. While the English team skim read, you watch the clip again and listen out for one day, one glorious day.
I stopped dead and stared after him. How wonderful he was. How swift and brave and graceful in his long trousers with bicycle clips around them and his scarlet school cap at a jaunty angle on his head. One day, I told myself, one glorious day, I will have a bike like that, and I will wear long trousers with bicycle clips, and my school cap will sit jaunty on my head, and I will go whizzing down the hill, pedalling backwards with no hands on the handlebars.
The English team found it.
He will have a bike like the other boy.
Amanda, could you give me another thing the author was going to do?
He will wear long trousers with bicycle clips. And he will wear his school cap, and his school cap will sit jointy on his head.
Are there any more things in the passage which the author was going to do one glorious day?
And he will go whizzing down the hill, pedalling backwards with no hands on the handlebars.
There were some good ideas there, especially skim reading.
That will really speed me up. I can quickly read just the pages mentioned in the question and then read carefully when I get to the bit I want.
And anything else?
I always need to read the question carefully, looking for clues and double-checking what it's asking me to do.
That's right. Write phrases if it asks for phrases, and write words if it asks for words.
No problem.
Well, that's the end of our programme on finding facts from fiction. So, let's check what we've done. With multiple choice questions, don't rely on your memory. Go back to the story to find the answer. Wrong choices might appear in the story, so check what the question asks. The questions usually follow the order of the story, so you don't have to read the whole story for each question. For short answer questions, which ask you to pick out words and phrases, read the question carefully and look for clues like page numbers and quotations that will help you find where the answer is. Skim read to find the important bit, then read carefully. Check what the question is asking you. And don't waste time copying great chunks from the story when you only need to write a few words. Now you and your teacher can go over this at school. And don't forget, you can wind the tape back and look at bits of the programme again. There are also books, an English audio tape and our interactive Revisewise website to help you prepare for your test. So we'll let you get on with your test and you get on with your revision.
The next programme is about getting the meaning from fiction texts.
To help you with your Key Stage 2 English test, we're looking at questions in the reading test where you need to get the meaning from a fiction text. So, what's the problem?
I'm a bit stuck on this question. Explain how you think Clara feels the night before she leaves, on the train, when she gets to Holland.
So you need to work out how Clara feels. Clara is the main character in a story which is set in the Second World War, called Leaving Home. She and her younger brother have to flee their home and parents in Germany for the safety of Britain.
But I've read the story in the reading booklet, and it doesn't tell me how she feels. So how am I supposed to know?
This question is asking you how you think the girl in the story is feeling. For this type of question, you need to look for clues in the story, then work out the answer. Questions like this usually start in similar ways, with words like, how do you know? Why do you think? Explain why. And they'll often ask you about the characters. You can learn a lot about characters, how they feel, what they're thinking, by what they say and do. You just have to pick up the clues. Think about the characters you watch on TV, like those in EastEnders.
Morning.
Should you be at the shop?
No, Louise is opening up. Got some coffee.
Well, I'd appreciate it if you got a move on.
You can't wait, can you?
How do you mean?
Get me on my own behind those shelves.
We've got a delivery due any minute.
Yeah, of course you have.
But we're nearly out of tinfoil and batteries.
I was joking.
All right.
Don't worry, I won't let anything interfere with my work. It's your coffee, boss.
Watching that, you know what sort of people they are by what they say and what they do. Here's the English team talking about some of them.
I think Peggy is a caring mother and always gives everyone a chance, because when Grant pushed Tiffany down the stairs, she didn't believe what everyone else said. She went to him to ask him before believing all the gossip.
You like these, don't we?
Oh, you big kid. You couldn't wait, could you?
Sorry.
No, that's all right. Look, Grant, just for today, let's try and forget this mess, shall we?
Yeah, right.
Come on, please try. Even if it's only for Courtney's sake.
I think Grant Mitchell is bad-tempered, aggressive and cruel.
He's aggressive and cruel because of the way he treated Tiffany, like by pushing her down the stairs. He's bad-tempered because he's always jumping to conclusions and getting annoyed, and this leads to aggression.
You're still my wife, and she's still my daughter.
Get your hands off me!
Not until we've talked about it properly!
You have to kill me!
Matthew is a nervous character, anxious and confused, and he doesn't know what to do about Saskia's murder. He panicked when the police found out about the murder.
You cannot sort this out, all right? How can you sort this out? You just leave that to me. She's dead, Steve. She's not coming back. This is the end for her.
I think Steve is sly, cruel and secretive, like when he murdered Saskia and kept it from everybody. And I don't really think he thinks about other people.
If I go down, I'm taking you with me.
Any clearer now?
I'm still not really sure that I get it.
Well, look, if your story said that Clara was rushing around, packing her case, laughing and joking with everyone on the night before she got the train, how would you think she felt?
Excited, happy, looking forward to going.
Right, but did I say she was excited or happy or looking forward to going?
No.
So how did you know?
Well, it's obvious. Clara would only be acting like that if she was happy.
Right. So the way that Clara was acting was the clue as to how she was feeling. Here are a couple of clips from a story called Teamwork. How do you think Dave is feeling in each of them? And how do you know?
And this is Dave.
Here's what the English team thought.
When he won the football match, he was like real happy because he wanted to mess around and he wanted to show off to others.
How did you know he was happy?
Because he was jumping around and shouting, "We won."
He was just scoring and laughing around, smiling.
And then he was really happy, jumping around, chanting and laughing.
He was hugging his friend when they won, and then the whistle blew and he's running around like a clown.
Like jumping around together and teasing other people, like just like joking with other people.
He was saying that we're the best on the pitch. There's no one else who could beat us.
Was he saying that nastily?
No, just like a joke. He was kicking his body around and chanting that we won, and dancing about, and like he was showing off.
What about this next clip?
Oh, see ya.
Well done, lads. Great performance. I'm very proud of you. And Harrison, that last goal. Excellent.
Thanks, Stordy.
I don't know what the team would do without you, Harrison.
Well.
Right, lads, get changed. Well done.
Don't know what the team would do without you, Harrison.
Why don't we just stay at home and let Harrison play all the positions himself? So, how does it feel to be the star of the team?
What are you on about?
It was very boring what's going on. Mind you, it was a good goal.
Well, look who scored it.
Oh, yeah,
Right. See you later.
See you, sir.
Hang on, Dave. Hold this a sec. Go on. Great goal we scored today.
I thought you did it all by yourself.
What? Is that what you're storming off? Because Baldwin praised me and not you.
I set you up.
Yeah, well, I scored the goal.
I think I better cross the road before your thumping big head knocks me over.
How does Dave feel now?
He felt left out because his face wasn't all happy and glorious. It was all like it was really upset and really like tearful, like he was going to cry because he was left out and no one cared for him, that he did pass the ball to his best friend that's going to make the goal.
His eyebrows went down and he's like walking slowly. He sat down slowly and he started thinking, and he didn't look at his friend when he started talking.
When he was walking, his shoulders are all down and his eyes are all like down and really sad and gloomy.
He was like a coat hanger, like coat hanging, coat hanging on the peg, and the arms and the coat goes down on the floor. He was like that.
Working out how characters feel is easy when you can hear them speaking, watch their actions, and look at their facial expressions on TV or in a film. It's more difficult, though, when you only have the printed words on the page. However, writers do give you the clues. See this sentence. When Tom opened the letter, his face went pale and his hand shook. It doesn't tell you how Tom was feeling, but you can work it out. Here's the English team.
He didn't have such a bad look on his face. When he opened the letter, he was like really worried what something happened, and he started shaking his head.
He went worried. What told you he went worried?
Face went pale.
It's like he just read a letter, which it was shocking, and he was a bit surprised, and his face went all pale, like he was going to be sick, and his hand shook, like he read something terrifying.
So, the clues in that sentence were that Tom's face was pale and his hands were shaking. Just how you'd be if you were in shock. Here's another one. Didn't hurt, said the boy defiantly. Tears came to his eyes as he ran away.
It did hurt him, but he's trying to cover it up and say that it never.
He tried to make the person who hurt him, make him think that it didn't hurt him at all, so he just saying in a kind of funny way.
Why do you think he ran away?
So he must have run away to hide his tears.
If he runs away, then he could hide and cry.
So, the first clue in this sentence was the word defiantly, which means boldly and aggressively. It describes how the boy said, didn't hurt. The other main clues were that tears came to his eyes and he ran away. In other words, the boy wanted to pretend that he wasn't hurt, so to hide his tears, he ran away. In questions which ask you to get the meaning from the text, you'll notice that there are several lines to write your answers on, like this. So you have to write a longer answer. 1 or 2 words are not enough. That's because you have to write an explanation of how you know how the character is feeling, as well as writing a description of how they feel.
I've got loads of lines to answer my question.
That's plenty of room for an explanation, but don't worry, try this one first. The little girl looked around at the crowded shop. She clung to her mother's skirt and closed her eyes tightly. Now, how do you think that little girl's feeling?
Frightened, nervous.
Yes, but why do you think that?
She clung to her mother's skirt so that they wouldn't be separated. And by closing her eyes, she could pretend that she wasn't there.
That's great. So what would you write down?
The little girl was feeling frightened and nervous because in the text it says that she clung to her mother's skirt.
And?
She closed her eyes to pretend that she wasn't there.
Exactly. So it's all about looking for clues in the text and explaining your answer. Do you know what you have to do now, then?
Yeah, I need to look for clues in what the characters say and do in the story and look at the words which the writer uses.
OK, so let's look again at the first part of your question.
Explain how you think Clara feels the night before she leaves.
Right.
So, I have to look in the story for things she says and does that might give me a clue.
OK, so let's have a look then. What can you see?
Here it is. I'm not crying, she whispered aloud. I'm not. She sat up in bed and rubbed her face with a corner of the quilt.
So, what does that tell you?
Well, she says she's not crying, but she rubs her face with the quilt. So she is crying. So I reckon that she's trying to be brave and not give away how upset she is.
Great, that's a good start. I think I'll leave you to get on with the rest. That's the end of our programme about getting the meaning from the fiction text. These sorts of questions often ask you, how do you know? Why do you think? or explain why. We saw that you won't find the exact answer in the story, but you will find clues. And from the clues, you can work out the answers. We also learned that it's important to use the text to explain what you think. You can always go over this by winding the tape back and looking at bits of the programme again. And there are also our books, audio tape and interactive Revisewise website to help you make the most of what you know when you're preparing for your test.
The next programme is about descriptive language.
In these programmes and in our books, audio tapes and on the internet, we're looking at the things you might find tricky when you do your Key Stage 2 English tests. This time we're looking at the use of descriptive language in the reading paper. So, what's the problem?
I'm a bit stuck on this question.
OK, let's hear it.
In the third part of the poem, the webs are described as diamond lace. What does the word diamond tell you about the webs?
Ah, it's a question on a poem about spiders and their webs. OK, well, let's find the poem in the reading booklet. OK, here's the right part. Every webbed and shadowed place, beautiful with diamond lace, is shown. So this is about comparing things.
I'm not too sure about that.
Well, that's all right. That's why I'm here, to remind you and you about how writers use descriptive language, why they choose the words they do in a poem or in any other piece of writing. Have a look at this and listen out for all the descriptive words.
Tired of swallowing children, the school gates yawn, woken once more from their rusty sleep by the jangling bell. Silent classrooms with sightless eyes of television and computer screens, waiting to see again. Now the bell has rung. Seats like rows of blunt teeth hunger for the time when children are invited to lunch by the bell. While in another room, teachers circle each other with words and laughter, deaf to the insistent reminders of the bell calling them back to work. The empty belly of the playground briefly fills with the yell of freedom, silenced all too soon by the strict voice of the bell.
In that poem, the writer has used lots of comparisons. Seats like rows of blunt teeth, hungry for the time when children are invited for lunch by the bell. He creates a picture by comparing the chairs to rows of blunt teeth. That's a simile. A simile is when a writer compares one thing with something else, something which they think is similar. See? Simile, similar. Easy to remember, eh? The English team have some more similes for you.
I think lions' manes look like fire because they have red and gold curves all the way around their heads.
At night, when a car goes by, the shadows on the wall spin round like a record. When my dad snores, it sounds like a deafening pneumatic drill. When my sister cries, she reminds me of a shriveled up tomato, all red and wrinkled.
When I see a dirty, used, smelly mop in the dustbin, it reminds me of my hairstyle when I get up.
Now, listen out for all the similes in this poem about spaghetti.
A plate heaped high with spaghetti, all covered with tomato sauce, is just about my favourite meal. It looks like a gigantic heap of steaming, tangled, mixed up, twizzled, twisted, wound up, woozled worms. I like picking them up one at a time, swallowing them slowly head first, until the tail flips across my cheek, before finally wriggling down my throat. But best of all, when I've finished eating, I go and look in the mirror, because the tomato sauce smeared around my mouth makes me look like a clown.
Sometimes writers want to take their descriptions even further. They describe something as if it really is something else. They use a metaphor. How about this one? The boy stared at me with fish eyes. Of course, they weren't really the eyes of a fish, but to say, the boy stared at me with eyes like a fish, wouldn't be so powerful. Much better in this case to use a metaphor. He stared at me with fish eyes. Have a listen to this and count the metaphors.
The beach is a quarter of golden fruit, a soft, ripe melon sliced to a thick green rind of jungle growth, and the sea devours it with its sharp, sharp white teeth.
Did you spot them? According to that writer, 1, the beach is the golden fruit of a melon. 2, the thick rind of the melon is the jungle growth. And 3, the sea lashing against the shore is a mouthful of sharp, sharp white teeth. So that's 3 metaphors. Sometimes writers use words that sound like the things they're describing. That's called onomatopoeia. They wonderfully conjure up sounds using words.
Whoosh! Whiz!
And sizzle.
Now you watch out for the onomatopoeias. Quite a few questions on the test paper will ask you to look at the words a writer has chosen and explain why they've chosen them. That's when you have to think about what the words mean and what the writer is trying to tell you by using them. Poet Burley Doherty talks about why she wrote her poem Season's Sketch and her choice of words.
These hills are in Derbyshire, not far from where I live. I love to come here. It's the middle of winter now and it's really cold. All the colours are rinsed out. It's hard to remember what it looked like a few months ago in the autumn, or what it's going to look like again in spring and in summer. When you write a poem, you can put all the colours back in. On white snow, black crows flap, torn scraps. Yellow daffodils blaze like cupped suns in their green skies of grass. Clouds, grey with sullen rain, let sudden blue through like a gift. October red sun flares over brown earth, showering orange fire. Writing a poem for me is very different from writing a story. In a poem, I'm trying to catch the magic, the absolute heart of something straight away, as if I'm taking a photograph of it at that very minute. Particularly when I was writing Season Sketch, I was trying to do 4 different quick snapshots of the seasons throughout the year. On white snow, black crows flap, torn scraps. Yellow daffodils blaze like cupped suns in their green skies of grass. When I was talking about daffodils in spring, I talked about them being like suns, cupped suns, and I talked about the grass as being like green skies. Maybe you've never thought of looking at the world upside down in that kind of way, but that's what a poet does. Clouds, grey with sullen rain, let sudden blue through like a gift. October red sun flares over brown earth, showering orange fire.
Did you notice how Burleigh Doherty used lots of similes, metaphors and onomatopoeia in her poem Season Sketch? Here's the poem again. See if you can spot them. On white snow, black crows flap, torn scraps. Yellow daffodils blaze like cupped suns in their green skies of grass. Clouds grey with sullen rain let sudden blue through like a gift. October red sun flares over brown earth, showering orange fire. So, did you spot them? Near the beginning of the poem, there's onomatopoeia. On white snow, black crows flap. Can't you just hear those crows flying? Flap, flap, flap. What about a simile? Remember, you're looking for something that's being compared with something similar. How about clouds grey with sullen rain, let sudden blue through like a gift? The clue there was like a gift. The glimpses of blue have been compared to a gift, which is just how it feels, isn't it? On a dull, rainy day when you're stuck indoors, the blue sky gives you hope that the rain is going to stop. Lastly, did you spot any metaphors? That's when the writer describes something as if it really is something else. Listen to this. October red sun flares over brown earth, showering orange fire. Do you think that Burleigh Doherty really thinks that the sun is setting the earth on fire? No, of course not. But she thinks it looks like that, and must have thought that a simile wouldn't be effective enough. What do you think? October red sun flares over brown earth, showering orange like fire. Which do you prefer? So now do you know how they help you see what they're writing?
They make comparisons with other things.
That's right, you're getting the hang of this. But I've got one more tip for you. If you're trying to work out why a writer has chosen a specific word, then try putting an ordinary, boring word in its place and see what difference it makes. Burleigh Doherty wrote, October red sun flares over brown earth. What if she'd written, October red sun shines over brown earth? Shines isn't as strong or hot or powerful a word as flares. OK, let's go back to your earlier question.
In the third part of the poem, the webs are described as diamond lace. What does the word diamond tell you about the webs?
And this is the third part of the poem. Every webbed and shadowed place, beautiful with diamond lace, is shown. So what's being compared there?
Spider's web and diamond.
Yes. So what does the spider's web look like?
Well, the threads of the web are covered in frost, and the sun is shining on it. So I suppose...
That's it. Try and think what it looks like. Close your eyes and imagine it.
It sort of sparkles. That's it. The web sparkles and diamonds sparkle. That's why the writer has compared them.
Brilliant. Write that down and you'll get your marks. So, what have we covered in looking at descriptive language? You'll be asked questions about the words a writer uses and why they use them. You'll have to think about how things are compared, or why a particular word has been used. We looked at similes and metaphors and onomatopoeia, how writers use a word that sounds like what it means. Now you and your teacher can go over this at school. And don't forget, you can wind the tape back and look at bits of the programme again. There are also books, an English audio tape and our interactive Revisewise website to help you prepare for your test. So we'll let you get on with your test and you get on with your revision.
The next programme is about giving your opinion, your personal response.
In these programmes, we're looking at the things you might find tricky when you do your Key Stage 2 English tests. This time, we're looking at your personal response to text in the reading paper. So, what's the problem?
I'm a bit stuck on this question.
OK, what does it say?
Write down what you think about the Leaving Home story.
Leaving Home is a story about Clara. It's set during the Second World War. Clara and her younger brother have to leave their parents and home in Germany for the safety of Britain.
I've been looking back at the story in the reading booklet to find the answer, but it's not there.
Ah, well that's because they're asking what you think. They want your personal response, your opinion. So, where do you think you're going to find the answer then?
I guess it's not going to be in the story.
Afraid not.
But there will be clues, won't there?
Well, not really. For this type of question, you need to write down your opinion. There's no right or wrong answer. You might like the story, or you might hate the story. It doesn't matter which, as long as you can explain why.
I liked it. That's easy.
Well, hang on a minute, not so fast.
What? I need to say more?
Yes, a lot more. Let's go back to the question. Just look at all that space the question gives you to write your answer in. If you only needed to write, I liked it, then there would only be one line to write on. But there are lots of lines. You have to give an explanation, give your reasons. You have to think why you liked the story.
But I'm not sure. It was interesting.
But what specifically was interesting? For this type of question, there may be no clues in the story, but there often are clues in the question. Look at the clues in the second half of that question. Why don't you read out what it says?
You should include the setting and events in the passage, the characters, how it made you feel.
Questions that ask you what you think, or for your opinion, will often expect you to refer to the plot, and remember, the plot is a series of events, the characters, the setting, and how the story made you feel. So it tells you what you need to write about.
But it's hard to put it into words.
It is, but it's what you do all the time. In films, books, or TV programmes, it's the setting, the plot, the characters, or how they make you feel, that makes you decide what you like or dislike. I think it's time for some opinions from the English team.
We like EastEnders because it's like really dramatic and it's really good because it's always set in different places and you don't really know what's going to happen. It always ends on cliffhangers. I like The Simpsons because it's funny and I like when Bart gets in trouble and also when Homer goes dull because he's always hurt himself. I really don't like Neighbours. It's really, really awful because every week it's always set in the same place, the same characters, and you can tell they're not realistic.
I like Friends because the characters are really nice and they're funny and the plot's really good. The script is amusing and it can make you feel really happy.
So, does that help with your question?
Well, I know I like Clara, but I'm not sure why.
OK, then you need to go back to your story. Because it's in the text that you find the reasons you can give as to why you like it or you don't like it. What happens in the plot that makes you want to read on or get bored? What does the text tell you about the characters that makes you like them or dislike them? What does it say about the setting that makes you like it or not? And lastly, what is it about the story that makes you feel the way you do? Watch the story of Theseus and the Minotaur. While you watch, think about the plot, the characters, the setting, and how it makes you feel. Think about whether you like the story or not, and why.
It all started a long time ago on an island across the sea from Athens, the island called Crete. Now, the king of Crete was King Minos. Very rich and powerful he was, and he lived in a magnificent palace with his 2 children, his beautiful daughter, Ariadne, and his son, the Minotaur. Now, the Minotaur was a terrible monster, half man and half bull, and he lived beneath the palace in a dark and dreadful place called the Labyrinth. Sort of underground maze it was, a maze that only the Minotaur could find his way through. But the worst thing about this terrifying monster was that it lived on flesh, human flesh. Every 9 years, the Minotaur cried out to be fed. When this happened, King Minos sent a message across the sea to Athens demanding 7 young men and 7 young women to feed his son's awful hunger.
Aegeus, king of Athens, was so afraid of King Minos that he dare not refuse. He wept as he watched the black-sailed ship travel south towards Crete. On board were the young men and women who'd been chosen as the victims of the Minotaur. That was bad enough, but worse than that, one of the men was King Aegeus' only son, Theseus. Theseus had insisted on going. He told his father that he would destroy the Minotaur and end the curse on Athens once and for all. So Theseus and the other sacrifices sailed across the sea to Crete and the terrifying monster that awaited them there.
What do you think of the story so far? Do you like stories like this that are set in the past and based on myths and legends? Are you intrigued about what might happen next?
Nobody was as strong as Theseus, nor as handsome, nor as clever. Hardly surprising that when Minos' daughter Ariadne saw Theseus, she fell deeply in love with him. So in love that she knew she had to do everything she could to save him from the Minotaur. In the dead of night, she went secretly to his room. There she told him of her love. Theseus promised that if he succeeded in killing the Minotaur, he would take her back to Athens as his wife. So she gave him a sword and a ball of thread and told him what he must do.
What about Ariadne? Do you like her for trying to save Theseus, or do you think she's being selfish, helping Theseus because she wants him to like her? Will she succeed, and will Theseus survive?
Slowly, he made his way through the tunnels, turning this way and that, unrolling the thread behind him so he could find his way out again, and all the time listening for the Minotaur. Then suddenly, the Minotaur was on him, snorting and stamping, roaring with fury. Theseus got one arm free and lashed out with the sword. The monster howled in rage and pain. Then Theseus threw himself to the Minotaur and drove his sword into the creature's throat.
Did that surprise you, Theseus killing the Minotaur? Or was it predictable?
It was over. The Minotaur was dead. So as the moon rose over the sea, Theseus and the other Greeks stole away down to the shore and set sail for Athens. And Ariadne sailed with them.
On the way back to Athens, Theseus took his ship to the island of Naxos to carry out repairs. While the crew worked,
Ariadne slept on the shore. When she woke, she was alone. Theseus and the ship had gone. She'd been left behind. Her brother was dead, her father's palace destroyed, and now Theseus had betrayed her. Anger rose in her like a storm, and she cursed Theseus and called on the gods for vengeance.
So, did you like it? What didn't you like about it? Here's what the English team thought.
I enjoyed the story, and my two favourite parts were where the Minotaur died and where Ariadne called on the gods, because it makes you think about other endings that could have happened.
Did you think the plot was too complicated?
It was an odd kind of plot because it had the son being the Minotaur of the king, so it was strange, and the king of Athens didn't like the other king, so he was scared of him.
Do you think it was a clever idea of the writer to use the idea of a ball of string?
Yeah.
Why?
If he didn't have the string, he would never have found his way back out again once he had killed the Minotaur.
Did you predict that he'd survive?
Yeah,
It's a bit obvious.
Even though you probably know that he's going to win, you just forget about that when it's in suspense.
And what about the characters?
Theseus.
He's the traditional hero in the story, and he sort of like saves the day by killing the Minotaur, and because he's brave and strong.
But I think that he was, in a way, kind of a bit of a coward for not telling Ariadne that how he felt and not saying that he didn't want to marry her.
It makes him like not a proper hero, because if he was a hero, then he would have taken her back and married her.
Ariadne.
At first I thought Ariadne was quite evil for just using Theseus, but at the end I felt quite sorry for her being left on the island.
I think that Ariadne was quite clever for what she did and thought of the world. She was also being horrible to her brother, even though he was a hungry, bloodthirsty monster. She still should have felt something for him.
The Minotaur.
I quite like the Minotaur because I feel a bit sorry for him, but I think it's not really his fault that he doesn't really like to eat normal food. He only likes human flesh.
What about the setting? Did you like the fact that it was set in a labyrinth? Or do you dislike historical stories? When you watch a film or a TV programme, you can see the setting, but when you read a story, you can't. You have to rely on the words a writer uses to describe the setting. If you read a good description of a setting, then you can really imagine it. Sometimes it's even better than watching a film. But back to Theseus and the Minotaur. How did the story make you feel? What about when Theseus is inside the labyrinth? Were you nervous about what was going to happen? How about at the end? Did you feel happy because no more people were going to be killed? Or did you feel upset because Theseus left Ariadne on the beach? Perhaps you had mixed feelings. That would be okay too. Because it's okay to like or dislike the story, but you must give your reasons, and they need to be based on the plot, characters and setting, and how it makes you feel. Do you get the idea?
Yeah, I need to give reasons for what I think about the story, and not just say I liked it.
So, what did you like about the leaving home story in your test?
I liked Clara. I could almost feel like I could put myself in her position and feel what she was going through.
That's the characters. I'll leave it to you to write down what you think about the plot, setting, and how it makes you feel.
Okay.
That's the end of our programme on how to make a personal response to the text. We looked at questions that ask you to give your personal opinion. We saw that there's no right or wrong answer, but you do need to write an explanation. We realised that there are often clues in the question, so read it carefully. Think about the plot. That's the events in the story. The characters, the setting, and how the text makes you feel. And we saw that when you do give your opinion, you need to base it on what you've read in the text.
The next programme is about finding facts from factual texts.
To help you with your Key Stage 2 English test, in this programme we're going to look at questions in the reading test which ask you to find facts from factual texts. Remember, your reading paper contains questions on fiction and factual texts. Have you found the factual texts in your reading booklet?
Yes, they're all about spiders.
Spiders, so a scientific text.
One bit tells you about spiders and their webs, but there are also some old adverts and a biography.
Yeah, there'll be a range of factual texts in the reading booklet. There might be letters, an interview, a newspaper report, or a historical text. Whatever there is, you'll have done something like it before. So what kind of question are you trying to do?
Multiple choice. I know that only one of the answers is right, but I can't remember which one.
OK, read the question out then.
On pages 4 and 5, you can find out how a garden spider spins a web. It takes the spider about 1 day, 1,000 minutes, 1 hour, or 3 hours. But I don't know anything about spiders.
Well, that's OK. The answer will always be in the text you're given. And you can go back to the reading booklet, so you don't need to remember the answer.
It will take me ages to read all through the booklet again.
Well, you don't need to read it all again. Did you notice the clues in the question that tell you where the answers are?
Oh. Pages 4 and 5.
Yes, so now you know where to look for the answer. What can you do to speed up trying to find it?
Skim read?
Exactly, so go on. To speed up finding answers to questions that ask for facts, always check the question for clues to where the answer might be, and then skim read. That means read quickly through the text until you find the bit you want, and then read carefully. Did you find it?
I think so. Is it... It takes a spider about 1 hour to spin an orb web.
That's right. So now you can ring the right answer. Did you find the rest of those multiple choice questions okay?
Yes, but I'm a bit stuck on this question now.
OK, read it out then.
Write down 2 facts from the text which show that spider's silk is very strong.
OK. Well, this question is still asking for facts, like the multiple choice question, so you'll still find the answer in the text. You don't have to use your memory, give an opinion, or say why you think something might have happened. I'm sure you've answered this type of question lots of times before. A good way to remember how to answer this type of question is to practice. Have a look at this film about the moon. Afterwards, there'll be some questions on it.
In 1969, Apollo 11 was sent on its mission to land the first man on the moon. 3 astronauts were sent on that historic journey.
I'm going off. And my pet going off. Sure has been a nice smooth countdown.
10,
thank you, babe.
9, ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
On
On their journey to the moon, they had the strange experience of being weightless because there's no gravity in space. People and anything that's not securely tied down floats around. Weightlessness did come in handy when they were trying to move heavy objects around, but it did have its problems, particularly when it came to eating and drinking. Without the effect of gravity, water doesn't pour. It just floats about in a globule, making it very difficult to drink. Just imagine trying to eat a plate of chips in space. Like those drops of water, they'd soon be floating around the spacecraft. This was the spacecraft which took the astronauts down to the moon. It was called the Lunar Module and nicknamed the Eagle.
Four forward, drift into the right.
The Eagle landed on the part of the moon called the Sea of Tranquility. It had only 30 seconds of fuel left.
Contact light. Okay, engine stop. We copy you down, Eagle. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
6 hours after landing, Neil Armstrong, one of the astronauts, became the first man to walk on the moon.
It's one small step for man.
He said, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Minutes later, Buzz Aldrin joined Neil Armstrong on the moon.
So, can you answer this question? In what year did Apollo 11 go on a mission to land a man on the moon? Now, don't worry. Just like in your test, you don't have to remember the answer. You can go back to your reading booklet, and we can look at the film again.
In 1969, Apollo 11 was sent on its mission to land the first man on the moon. 3 astronauts were sent on that historic journey.
So, what year was it? (1969). Okay, so next question. Write down one advantage of weightlessness and one disadvantage of weightlessness. Back to the film.
On their journey to the moon, they had the strange experience of being weightless because there's no gravity in space. People and anything that's not securely tied down floats around. Weightlessness did come in handy when they were trying to move heavy objects around, but it did have its problems, particularly when it came to eating and drinking. Without the effect of gravity, water doesn't pour. It just floats about in a globule, making it very difficult to drink. Just imagine trying to eat a plate of chips in space. Like those drops of water, they'd soon be floating around the spacecraft.
Did you spot the answer? Let's see if the English team can.
You know what an advantage is?
An advantage is that you can do something in space that's with your weightlessness, and a disadvantage is that you can't do it properly, that you're trying to do it.
Can you think of an advantage then? Can you find an answer?
Food and drink.
Food and drink. Is that an advantage or a disadvantage? Let's go back to the film to check.
Without the effect of gravity, water doesn't pour. It just floats about in a globule, making it very difficult to drink. Just imagine trying to eat a plate of chips in space. Like those drops of water, they'd soon be floating around the spacecraft.
It's a disadvantage that you're trying to eat, but the food and water just moves about everywhere. And an advantage is that it comes in handy when they're trying to move heavy objects around.
And another question. What was the nickname of the lunar module?
This was the spacecraft which took the astronauts down to the moon. It was called the Lunar Module and nicknamed the Eagle.
What's the nickname of the lunar module?
Eagle.
Where does it say that?
The spacecraft which took the astronauts down to the moon was called the Lunar Module and nicknamed the Eagle.
Okay then, just one last question. Who was the first man to step on the moon?
6 hours after landing, Neil Armstrong, one of the astronauts, became the first man to walk on the moon.
It's one small step for man.
He said, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Minutes later, Buzz Aldrin joined Neil Armstrong on the moon.
Buzz Aldrin.
That's an easy mistake to make. It does mention Buzz Aldrin in the film, but was he the first man to walk on the moon?
Minutes later, Buzz Aldrin joined Neil Armstrong on the moon.
So if you join Neil Armstrong, who was the first person on the moon?
Neil Armstrong.
Like the questions which ask for facts in your reading test, the answers to all those questions were in the film. So, in your test, always remember to go back to the text to check your answers. Now let's get back to your question.
OK, write down 2 facts from the text which show that spider silk is very strong.
OK, so what do you need to do?
Go back to the text.
Right.
And skim read till I find the bit I want.
And what is it you're looking out for?
The bit about how strong the spider's web is, that's when I start to read carefully.
OK, so skim read. Why don't you have a go at skim reading too? Here's the information about the spider's web. Read quickly, skim read, through the text until you get to the bit where it talks about how strong the spider's silk is. In your test, you can keep going back to your question to make sure you remember what you're looking for. So we'll keep the question up on the screen. Here's a bit about how strong the web is, so that's where you stop skimming and need to start reading carefully. Can you find the fact that shows how strong the spider's silk is? So, what's the answer?
I found one answer. It says it's as strong as steel thread, and I know steel is very strong.
That's good, so write that down. Notice, for this question, there are lots of lines to write on for each fact, so you know that you need to write a phrase or a sentence, not just one word. So, what have you written?
We know that spider silk is very strong because it says in the text that spider silk is as strong as steel thread.
OK, so that'll get you 1 mark. But remember, this question is asking for 2 facts, so what about the other fact?
I can't find it. It's not in this bit of the text.
No, it isn't. You see, the facts that a question asks for might not always be next to each other in the text. So what can you do?
Read on.
Go ahead then. And why don't you too? See if you can find the other fact that shows how strong the spider's silk is. The question will stay up on the screen too to remind you what you're looking for. Did you find it? Did you?
I think so. Is this it? It can hold 1,000 times the spider's own weight. Sounds strong to me.
It certainly does, and that's just the phrase you needed to answer this question. So write it down.
OK.
Well, that's the end of our programme on finding facts from factual writing. So let's check what we've done. With questions that are asking you to find facts from factual writing, don't rely on your memory. Go back to the text to find the answer. Read the question carefully and look for clues, like page numbers, that will help you find where the answer is. Skim read to find the important bit, then read carefully. Now you can go over all these things at school with your teacher. Don't forget, you can always wind the tape back and look at bits of the programme again. There are also books, audio tapes and our interactive Revisewise website to help you make the most of what you know when you're preparing for your test. So, we'll let you get on with your test and you can get on with your revision.
The next programme is about getting the meaning from factual texts.
To help you with your Key Stage 2 English test, in this programme we're going to look at questions in the reading test, where you need to get the meaning from a factual text. So, what's the text you're reading about?
I'm reading about sea monsters. There are 3 historical reports about sightings of sea monsters in the reading booklet. One's called the Daedalus Incident, the other's Cruising on the Osborne, and the last one's Australian Sighting. And I've got to answer a question about them.
OK, what's the question?
Which one of these do you think is most likely to be true? Tick the one you have chosen. The Daedalus Incident, Cruising on the Osborne, or Australian Sighting. Why have you chosen this one? But I can't find the answer.
Ah, well, you're not going to find the answer to this question in the text. This type of question is not asking for facts. You have to work out the answer from clues in the text. So, you've looked in the reading booklet.
Yes, I was looking for something that said one of the stories was true.
Well, unfortunately, the texts don't tell you that directly, but they do give you clues. Go back and read the beginning of the question again.
Which one of these do you think is most likely to be true? Oh, I see, it's asking what I think.
That's right. For questions which ask what you think, explain why, or how do you know, you need to work out the answer for yourself from the clues in the text. Don't worry, it's not that difficult. I'm sure you've done lots of questions like it before. Have a look at this film called The Water We Use. It's about water pollution. There'll be some questions on the cleaning process afterwards.
Cool, clean water, bubbling down from the hills, till it reaches a town. This is Colne in Lancashire, where small factories line the River Calder. For the next 80 kilometres or so, the Calder gets wider and wider, passing through open countryside until eventually it meets the sea in a wide estuary. Upstream, back in Colne, all kinds of things get dumped in the river to spoil it and pollute it. Cleaning up all our mess costs the water companies millions of pounds every year. The first process scoops out large solid objects, like paper. The water still has a lot of dangerous sewage in it as it flows on to the next stage. Here, the water's allowed to settle. More solids sink to the bottom, and this crust of grease from leftover food is scraped off the top. Next, the water is churned up to mix it with air. This helps the special bacteria in this tank to actually eat up any remaining raw sewage. A sludge of fed bacteria settles to the bottom of this round pond and clear, clean water runs off the top.
The first question is, why do you think that the river is not polluted up in the hills, but is further down? Remember, this question isn't asking you to remember any information. There will be clues in the text. So, let's go back to the film.
Cool, clean water, bubbling down from the hills, till it reaches a town. This is Colne in Lancashire, where small factories line the River Calder. For the next 80 kilometres or so, the Calder gets wider and wider, passing through open countryside until eventually it meets the sea in a wide estuary. Upstream, back in Colne, all kinds of things get dumped in the river to spoil it and pollute it.
The clues to answer this question are that in Colne, small factories line the river, and in Colne, all sorts of things get dumped in the river to spoil it and pollute it. So, the factories pollute the river and people pollute the river by dumping rubbish. This all happens in Colne, downriver from the hills, where the cool, clean water starts its journey. So, why do you think the river is not polluted up in the hills, but is further down? I think that up in the hills, it's not polluted because there's been nothing to pollute the water. But in Colne, the river is polluted by factories which line it and people dumping things into it. How about this question? What do the clean-up processes tell you about the makeup of sewage? Back to the film.
The first process scoops out large solid objects, like paper. The water still has a lot of dangerous sewage in it as it flows on to the next stage. Here, the water's allowed to settle. More solids sink to the bottom, and this crust of grease from leftover food is scraped off the top. Next, the water is churned up to mix it with air. This helps the special bacteria in this tank to actually eat up any remaining raw sewage. A sludge of fed bacteria settles to the bottom of this round pond, and clear, clean water runs off the top.
Did you spot the clues in the text? Let's look at the question again. The key to the answer is the word processes. You need to look out for when the processes are mentioned, as that's when you'll get the clues to answer your question. Here is where it first mentions the processes.
The first process scoops out large solid objects, like paper.
So, the first process tells you that there are large solid objects in the sewage. Back to the film.
Here, the water's allowed to settle. More solids sink to the bottom, and this crust of grease from leftover food is scraped off the top.
The next process mentions two other things that make up the sewage. Solids, which weren't scooped up by the first process, so must be smaller, and grease. And finally...
Next, the water is churned up to mix it with air. This helps the special bacteria in this tank to actually eat up any remaining raw sewage. A sludge of fed bacteria settles to the bottom of this round pond, and clear, clean water runs off the top.
So, the last process involves bacteria, which are extremely small organisms. So, the remaining sewage must be extremely small too. So, how could you write an answer to this question? How about the different types of clean-up processes each clean up a different type of sewage? The first deals with large objects, the next deals with smaller objects and grease, and the last one deals with very small objects, so small that they are eaten up by bacteria. Did you notice, for all those answers, you needed to give an explanation? You always do with this type of question. You need to explain how you know what the answer is, as well as give the answer. So, let's get back to your question.
Which one of these do you think is most likely to be true? Tick the one you have chosen. The Daedalus incident, cruising on the Osborne, or Australian sighting. Why have you chosen this one?
But I don't think any of them are true.
Well, even if you don't really believe any of them, you've got to tick one of the answers. You need to work out which is most likely to be true from the information you're given. Answers always need to be based on the text you're given, not on what you might have learned at school or home about anything like sea monsters. So, what do you think you should do next?
Go back to the text.
Exactly. Here's the Daedalus incident. While I read it through, why don't you think about whether you think the story is true? It is early in the evening of the 6th of August, 1848. HMS Daedalus is sailing home after 4 years at sea. The weather is overcast and dull. One of the officers is gazing idly out to sea when he sees something moving. He cries out in surprise. Lieutenant Drummond comes over to see what the matter is. He calls the captain over. Together with 4 others, they watch an amazing sight. Approaching them is an enormous sea serpent, at least 18 meters long. It holds its head and neck out of the water as it swims steadily past the ship. The monster passes close enough for the men to see every detail, but it does not seem to notice the ship. It's visible for a full 20 minutes. So, what did you think? Seem likely? Do you think that report could be true?
I'm not sure. If the weather was dull, then they might have mistaken what they'd seen, especially after 4 years at sea. Also, you'd think the creature wouldn't go near a big ship.
Yeah, that could be right. But then again, quite a few people saw that creature, didn't they?
Yes.
Well, look at it this way. If one person said to you they'd seen an alien, would you believe them?
Probably not.
But if 2 or 3 people told you they'd seen an alien, would you believe them?
I might.
And if 4 people said
I see what you're getting at. At least 6 people saw the monster, so it might be true. But I'm not sure. I better have a look at the other 2 before I decide.
OK. Here's the second sighting. Cruising on the Osborne. What do you think about it? On the 2nd of June, 1877, the British yacht Osborne was cruising through calm waters when 3 people on deck saw a very large animal, at least 16 metres long. It surfaced close to the ship and quickly swam away. The creature had a large, wide body with 2 enormous flippers. In front of the body was a long neck and a small head. No one could say what it was. Possible? So, what about this sighting?
The water was calm, so the weather was probably good. And 3 people did see it, so it could be true.
Yeah.
But it did swim away quickly, and perhaps they really didn't get a good look at it.
You're right. You better wait until you've seen the 3rd sighting before you make your decision. And here it is for you, too. Do you believe the Australian sighting? In 1962, Robert Le Serac was sailing off the Australian coast. He spotted a large, dark animal resting in shallow water. It looked like a huge serpent, about 20 metres long. When Le Serac swam closer, it dived into deeper water. You've heard all 3 sightings now. What do you think? Remember, there's no right or wrong answer to this one, but you do need to make sure that the answer you give is based on the information in the text. So, what do you think?
It's a more modern sighting, which means it could be true. But he was on his own, and it sounds like he didn't really get a good look at it. And I can't believe anyone would actually swim up to a sea serpent, so I think that one's definitely not true.
OK, fair enough, but what about the other 2?
That's harder. But I think the Delius incident is most likely because more people saw it and for longer.
I think that's brilliant. Put that down then and you'll get your mark for your explanation. That's the end of our programme about getting the meaning from factual text. These sorts of questions often ask you, how do you know? Or, why do you think? Or, explain why. We saw that you won't find the exact answer in the text, but you will find clues. And from the clues, you can work out the answers. We also learned that it's important to use the text to explain what you think. Single word answers or short phrases won't do for this type of question. You'll need to write sentences. You can always go over this at school by winding the tape back and looking at bits of the programme again. There are also our books, audio tapes and our interactive Revisewise website to help you make the most of what you know when you're preparing for your test.